I'm about to watch Purple Hearts, which is the new Diabetic movie. Don't really know anything about it other than that the protagonist is type 1 diabetic, but the actor playing her is not. And then she marries someone in the military, a Marine, to get better health insurance to afford her medication while going after her dream of being a musician. That's all I really know. But I'm excited because we love T1D representation. And at the time I'm watching this, it is in the Netflix top 10. Love to see it. Let's see how it goes. See you on the other side. Ah, yes, the haters to lovers trope. Well, the flirting's not great, or the dialogue, but we're getting there. Just started.
Excuse me? Okay.
There's a really rude pickup line that I was not expecting. Okay. Okay. Luke, I don't like so far. He's kind of mean. Okay, here we go. First diabetic scene. Oh, her needle's so long. Ugh. She went out to her car to do it? I get it. I've been there. It can be really embarrassing, especially if you're doing it in the place you work. I get that. Huge needle for her insulin, but she did syringe. The vial just said insulin though, I understand, but that's not how it looks in real life, girl, but I get it. Otherwise it looked pretty realistic. I applaud that.
220 for the short acting.
That's a hard scene to watch because I literally have had that same interaction. Being out of like both insulins, but you're struggling with co-pays or just with insurance in general. And so you have to pay so much out of pocket. That was a good scene to put in because it's literally, that is so accurate. And they included both types of insulin, long acting, short acting. She had a reserve vial. I mean, I'm pretty impressed. Oh, she sees the Marine logo. She's scheming. Oh, it's getting a little steamy. She got a pump, yay. That's exciting. We are reaching a turning point. No spoilers. But I think this is a great time. Take a potty break, think about the first half, and then recoup. Okay, so far, there's just a lot happening because there's the dual storylines of their day-to-day life, of her trying to be a musician, but also of her dealing with diabetes, and him fighting in Iraq. But then there's also a lot of political things happening. It deals with immigration, it deals with racism, healthcare, obviously, the military. It's kind of tackling a lot of political issues, which is fine and is to kind of be expected with diabetes in general because it's a very politicized thing now. But it is kind of a lot to tackle on when you're already dealing with something as big as healthcare. But I still admire that it is a key point of the character and that they have honestly done a pretty realistic job of representing what a diabetic goes through in the grand scheme of things. Now, as someone who's being nitpicky, there's some unrealistic things too, but I'm just kind of happy to see the representation. However, it also seems to romanticize it a little bit, which we'll dive into, I think, after I've digested all of it and see where it goes from here. So, with all that being said, let's watch the second half and see what happens. Well, now it's just getting sad. Don't trust a man who's unhappy about getting a dog. Also, they could have used this as a moment to talk about diabetes dogs, which would have been kind of cool, but that's going the extra mile, I think. Something is like off-putting about this scene, and I don't know why. Okay, we had a high blood sugar earlier. Now we're dealing with a low blood sugar. where she's like passing out. Pretty realistic. The alarm sound was not realistic for her, I'm assuming, closed loop system. I thought it was just a pump, so my mistake. But I do like that he was very caring and knew about it. He asked her the last time she ate, and she didn't know, and then is now taking care of her. So I love that it's showing that she's not alone in this, and kind of shows how other people can help out when things like that happen. So far so good with that scenario. Enemies to lovers. Didn't see that coming. Well, it's over. Now, I love a good rom-com. This was not really a rom-com, more of a rom-drama. But 2 hours is a little long. And there were a lot of topics covered, which I will go over more in depth a little later. But immediate reactions, I feel pretty in the middle about this movie. They didn't do anything outright offensive with diabetes, which is always great because often in media and in movies, we see it as the butt of a joke, or it's represented really, really poorly. Could they have done things much better though too? Yes, for starters, having an actress with diabetes would have been really great to fact check some of those things like the low versus high blood sugar, things like that, incorporating it more. But in general, this is a great first step for diabetics and diabetes representation, especially since it is a really big plot point. Now, it might have been overshadowed almost by the many other plot points going on, but I'm still really happy to have even seen a movie where it was talked about for a good chunk of it. So I do applaud them for that, and everything else, let it sit with me for a second and I'll give a more concise review of this movie. Okay, at the time I'm filming this, it's the #1 movie on Netflix, which is so exciting because it's a movie with a girl who has type 1 diabetes that's leading the way in the nation out of all the movies that have been released. So it's really exciting to see that representation actually get recognized and be something people are watching and taking notice of. And I'm really hopeful that this just catapults more and more people to do their research on diabetes, to support businesses and organizations that are all about type 1 diabetes research and advocacy. And I just really hope this leads to a lot of open doorways for the T1D community. So I took the rest of the night to think more about the movie, and honestly, in terms of diabetes representation, which is the whole reason I even watched this movie, I'd have to give it a solid 3.5 stars. They did a really great job of showing how hard it is and impactful it is on someone's life, especially when you're newly diagnosed and it's hard to afford all these new medications and change your entire lifestyle and have other people in the family that don't have diabetes and don't understand what you're going through. That kind of hit home for me, especially one scene in particular with the pharmacy I thought was really impactful, where she's unable to afford certain medications and might have to wait a few days. And you can go watch it yourself. I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought that was really impactful. In general, there was a lot of great and accurate representation of type 1 diabetes that we often don't get in the media with things like this. But of course, there were still a few inaccuracies that, as someone living with diabetes, I definitely noticed right out of the gate. But overall, I do have to applaud them on doing quite a bit of research and promoting something that is affecting so many people more and more. So let's talk about a few of the things they could have done better that I definitely picked up on as a diabetic. The first thing was we saw her giving herself a lot of insulin, but not eating food with it. And she, of course, could have been combating a really high blood sugar, maybe on the brink of DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. But I don't know if that was the case. It just showed her checking her blood sugar and then taking almost a whole syringe full of insulin, which terrified me because I personally don't take that much. And I know people have different sliding scales for their insulin all the time, but it just seemed like a lot of insulin, especially for a newly diagnosed diabetic. So it would have been nice to have that food go along with it, because that typically is what happens when you take insulin, at least to that level or that amount of insulin. There's another scene kind of like this where Cassie is eating a meal with Luke, the male protagonist, and she doesn't take any insulin or check her blood sugar at all, which is kind of alarming because that's something you need to do before you eat and also after, and you should always be checking those things, especially around meal times, which to me was alarming because it shows she wasn't taking her insulin when she needed to, and maybe that's why she needed to take so much late at night, because she wasn't taking it for her meals. So I would have loved for them to casually just have her checking her blood sugar and taking insulin before she ate something to show what it's actually like. And again, I appreciate that it was even showing her do it at all, but it would have made more sense to do it before meal times as well. Another thing that made it a little less believable and probably led to some of those small inaccuracies was the fact that there wasn't a diabetic actress playing the lead role of a type 1 diabetic. And I know there are plenty out there that they could have used that would have made it even more hard-hitting. I think the actress did a great job and did plenty of research, but it's those things where you don't know until you live with it that I would have loved to see. One thing that I've honestly been struggling with after seeing this movie is whether or not it's romanticizing diabetes. And now the character doesn't fall in love with her because of her diabetes, but there is that moment when she's having a low blood sugar and they have a sweet exchange, to say the least, following that. And it's almost like he feels like he has to take care of her and be the protector when, yes, that's very much welcomed and acknowledged and great, and we need support, but it shouldn't be the reason you fall for someone or a reason that you want to get intimate with them. That felt a little strange to me, and I don't think the whole movie was about romanticizing this. Thinking about it more, I might see it differently, but I am teetering on that line of whether or not it romanticized T1D or not. And the other thing I'm kind of struggling with is representation versus exploitation. A better way to represent rather than exploit would be to have a diabetic actress, or to maybe donate part of the proceeds that they make from this movie towards organizations that are supporting type 1 diabetes research and advocacy so that people can afford their insulin without going to extremes that this movie shows. I sincerely hope that happens. I don't know if it will. I haven't heard anything about that, but representation is a great starting point, but it cannot be the ending point. And seeing as it's still the #1 movie on Netflix in the US, they're bound to make some money from this that could easily help so many others who might be in a situation like Cassie's. I believe in general, at its core, this movie was trying to truly showcase what it's like to live with diabetes, the hardships that many people are facing who live with it, as well as other hardships that are going on in our world right now. And for that, I'm grateful, because I think it's a great step in the right direction. Now, moving forward, we can take this movie and learn from it and go from there, because we are always trying to do things better. We are always trying to get more and more representation and advocacy out there, spread the word about how important it is to find a cure for type 1 diabetes and make it accessible for all who have this disease to live with it. I don't know if I'd watch it again for a while, but I think it's a great step for people who like romance movies and who want to learn more about diabetes. Hopefully I can do another movie review sometime soon that has diabetes in it. I'll be on the lookout for those. But until next time,